This was the British Empire in 1763. They had just won the French and Indian War, securing a massive expanse of new territory. But the victory came with a cost, a crippling national debt that stretched across the Atlantic. To manage this deficit, Parliament looked toward the American colonies. They began implementing a strategy of direct taxation, attempting to pull revenue directly from the pockets of their overseas subjects. This economic pressure triggered a radical response. Figures like Samuel Adams and the Sons of Liberty moved beyond legal petitions, organized boycotts, and eventually resorted to looting the homes of royally appointed officials. These localized clashes over tax policy were widening a gap that couldn't easily be closed. Every street protest and ransacked home drove the colonies and the crown further into an adversarial relationship. Great Britain responded to this unrest by attempting to restore law and order through force. They dispatched General Thomas Gage to Boston, where several regiments of British troops occupied the town to crush the growing insurgency. In April 1775, Gage attempted a secret maneuver to seize a colonial powder magazine in Concord. But rebel riders intercepted the news, galloping through the night to alert local militias that the British were on the move. When the British reached Lexington, they were met by armed Minutemen. In the confusion, a single musket fired, the famous shot heard round the world. Regardless of who pulled the trigger, that single shot transformed a decade of political and economic protest into a kinetic war. By early 1776, the colonies were in an existential bind. Militias were actively fighting British regulars, yet the colonies still lacked a unified, legal objective for the conflict. This is the title page of Common Sense, a radical pamphlet by Thomas Paine. It catalyzed to the public by arguing that the only logical path forward was a complete and total secession from the British Empire. By the summer of 1776, the Continental Congress put these arguments into writing with the Declaration of Independence. This document proposed a republic based on the consent of the governed, backed by a list of grievances against King George. This written philosophy gave the colonists a cause that transcended a simple tax revolt, turning the war into a global ideological revolution. On the ground, the reality was grim. General George Washington's inexperienced Continental Army was immediately routed in New York by General William Howe, forcing a desperate retreat. This is a 1779 $55 bill. To fund the war, the new government printed vast amounts of this paper currency, which triggered runaway hyperinflation and left the army struggling to buy basic supplies. The conflict also sparked multiple internal civil wars. While thousands of enslaved people fled to British lines for promised freedom, Native American leaders like Joseph Brant formed alliances to protect their lands from the very revolutionaries who claimed to be fighting for liberty. The struggle for independence forced every inhabitant to choose a side in a messy, multi-faction conflict where survival often dictated loyalty. In 1777, the momentum shifted at the Battle of Saratoga. For the first time, a massive American victory demonstrated to the world that the rebellion could hold its own against British regulars. That success secured a formal military alliance with France. The French brought the naval power and funding the colonies lacked, alongside volunteer leaders like the Marquis de Lafayette. By 1781, the strategy came together at Yorktown. As this map shows, French naval lines blocked any escape by sea, while combined American and French ground forces trapped British General Cornwallis on the peninsula. Cornwallis's surrender proved that a united colonial front, sustained by foreign allies, could bring the British Empire to the negotiating table. The war officially ended in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris. Here, at the bottom of the document, the signatures and seals mark Great Britain's formal recognition of the United States and its new borders. With the peace secured, George Washington voluntarily resigned his military command. It was a radical act that ensured the new republic would be governed by civilians rather than a military leader. But the new nation was born with deep contradictions. While figures like Abigail Adams advocated for the rights of women, the republic's grand ideals of equality were not extended to them. Similarly, Black Americans and Native Americans were entirely excluded from this new freedom, facing continued enslavement and the aggressive loss of their ancestral territories. While the war with Britain was over, the challenge of building a nation that lived up to its own rhetoric of liberty remained.